Welcome everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Um, Couple things. Lots to cover today. We're going to do a deep dive of sorts into the now that we have our federal loan rates. Really, uh, state rates have been announced. So we're going to kind of give our best practice walkthrough for you all. So as you're advising families which loans to take, stuff like this. I think these are usually hard questions for you to answer, and also for good reason in the sense that there is no universal answer, right? We have this conversation, as you would imagine, dozens of times a day this time of year, and we will for the coming weeks and months. And we're going to give, a whole bunch of different recommendations in terms of what loan or combination of loans are best for specific families. So keep that in mind, right? It would be nice if there were some easy, like, hey, this is absolutely the best loan that everybody should take advantage of. That doesn't exist. But I think there's some best practices. There's some real meaningful guidance that you can provide families, help them understand their pros and cons. You're welcome to share this presentation if it's helpful. And as a matter of fact, let me make sure that let me go grab this. We are doing one, good timing. I am glad I did not forget to do this. We're doing one tonight. So we're going to do kind of a faster version this afternoon as we, because I'm just going to assume that some of you are kind of, fairly well versed on this stuff. Obviously, you interrupt me with any questions, and I don't want to make assumptions here, but we'll do a real comprehensive deep dive tonight, Peg and myself. So that link that I just put in the chat, if you want to, I know it's tonight, so not a lot of advance time for your families, and I know a ton of you guys, they're already off for the summer, depending where you are in the country. But this presentation tonight, again, we kind of do a more comprehensive walkthrough about in addition to what I'm about to do for you. So you can blast that out to your families if they want, because like all of the webinars that we do, even if they register, if they can't attend live, they'll get the recording, right? So even if they can't make it on short notice, and again, there'll be a ton of back and forth for families and going through different case studies and stuff like that. So again, please feel free to share that. Like always, any questions that you guys have, interrupt me during this. I want to make this interactive. And again, the talking point is, all right, for the class 2024, where we know where we're going, knock on wood, right? We know what it's going to cost. Again, knock on wood this year. How are we going to pay for this? So we'll talk about when to deploy what resources. And for those families that need to borrow, what are best practices there? We got something really cool at the end where we are, as part of a grant program. I think most of you know what we are all about, right? Again, and I should probably have started with, I'm Matt Carpenter, founder at College Aid Pro. But we offer financial aid, scholarship resources, education to high school counselors and their families across the country. As a lot of you know, we've been our partnering together already. If you want to know about how to partner together further, please let me know. And we got a really cool grant program, which is basically going to allow us to give away kind of the paid version of our software to a handful of school districts. So if that's something that you're interested in for your school district and you don't partner with us already, please let us know. Or you don't have, most of the folks that partner with us, it's in the kind of free capacity, but some schools that we partner with pay for the premium version of our software for their families in the same way that you do for Naviance or Maya Learning or Score, School Links, those types of platforms. But again, we got a pretty cool grant program. We're going to be able to dish out some of these kind of paid relationships. So please, if that's something that you want to implement at your school, just email counselor@collegeaidpro.com and we will talk about how to get you propped up. And actually, that's a good starting point, where for those of you that aren't familiar with our platform, let me just start here, because what we are still doing before we talk about paying the bill and borrowing for college, with the madness this year with FAFSA, everything being delayed, some financial aid packages have still not come through. There's still a lot of appeal opportunities out there, right? So one of the places that we'll start tonight is we'll say, look at if you before you start thinking about how to pay the bill, let's think about how we can reduce that amount, maybe even further. Have you appealed yet? Did you confirm whether or not you got a good deal? So a really nice part about our software is that, and again, each family will have their own platform, school counselors have theirs as well, but they can figure out, okay, here's what my family should be paying at Boston College, right? What did we actually pay? So at this part of the platform, the families will upload their award letters, right? And we will translate those award letters to help them understand it. But then we will tell you, did you get a good deal? Did you get a fair deal? What is the likelihood that you could go back and appeal for more, right? So those are a couple of key components of the software for the class 2024 that we're leaning into right now, because there's still opportunities here. There's still a chance that we could make some of these schools more affordable before we have to think about borrowing here. Give me 1 second. Okay. Turning off my Slack as well, if you guys can kind of hear that annoying stuff going on in the background. Okay, I want to bring up our deck and, again, at least give you all abbreviated walkthrough here. Okay, and here we are, College Aid Pro. So first of all, just the timeline, right? We're trying to educate parents on, all right, when does this happen? I think a lot of people are kind of panicked now. They've just gone through this madness of the admissions and financial aid process, and it's like, oh my God, we got to come up with $30,000 in 2 months, like, or whenever it's due. How are we going to do this? So we try to level set that, right? Most schools will issue bills early mid-July, due early to mid-August, and then again for the second semester towards the end of the calendar year, right? Most educational loan applications are almost, if they're not instantaneous, they're 1 to 3 days. So families, a lot of them, their only experience with taking out a loan this big is with, they do a refi on their home or they take out a home equity loan, and that can take months, right? For those of you that experience going through that. Whereas this is just really, really quick. So again, we just like to tell them, this is totally normal. Sit tight. If you feel like you're behind, you're not. This is kind of the normal progressions here. We give them kind of a false deadline to say, guys, you want to make a decision and at least, have this in place by the middle of July. Because that way, any type of hiccups or whatever, or we change our minds, we're giving ourselves plenty of time before these bills are going to be due at most colleges. And of course, it's the theme that we're always preaching. Every college is different. So yes, these are the average deadlines and things like this, but those are just averages, and there's going to be outliers on either side. You need to find out, when are these bills being issued and are due at your college that you're going to be attending, right? Most colleges, not all, have payment plans. Most of them are 10-month payment plans. They typically start now or a couple of days ago in June. That doesn't mean we're too late, but usually if we don't start making payments until July or August, they have us retroactively make that first payment a little bit higher. So as we talk about payment plans, that's there's some urgency there. This is just something that I think is helpful to just kind of frame every dollar counts, right? If we're able to borrow, or if we're able to pay $100 a month for college, and we're able to do that out of savings, out of cash flow, right? That's $5,000 less than somebody's going to have to borrow. If we look at college as 4 years, 48 months, right? Round up a little bit, $100 a month equals $5,000 less that somebody's going to have to borrow. What's the takeaway there? This is just a great opportunity to say, hey, this is a huge kind of landmark, benchmark, whatever, in our family's lives. Let's kind of hit the pause button and just do and again, I'm sure this is school counselors, this is going to be a little bit, this isn't the messaging you're going to have with your families, but it's something we'll talk about tonight, to say, use this as an opportunity to just do some self inventory. What gym memberships are we not using? You know, what are should we cut the cord with cable? We've been talking about it for a while. We never watched Disney Plus, right? Clean out your financial junk drawer. It's an amazing thing that we should all do once or twice a year. One of these years, I'm going to heed my own advice here. But the takeaway is, if we do that, I always challenge families. I'm like, I can all but guarantee you, if you stared at your kind of monthly payments, you could find a way to free up $100 a month. That's $5,000 less that somebody has to borrow. So that's just kind of a nice. We're trying to get some positive juju going for families here, as this is not a fun part of the process, which is, oh my goodness, how am I going to pull this off, right? Internally, the name of this presentation internally is how the hell are we going to pay for this, right? That's how we present it to our families that we work with, but that's kind of the idea. So we start with reducing the ways, the ways that we have to borrow, right? Number one, can we appeal to the college and reduce the amount? Can we free up some extra cash flow? Most of these colleges have, like I mentioned, payment plans. An important thing to remember with these 10-month payment plans, you don't have to pay for the whole thing. So if I'm a family and after financial aid and scholarships, whatever, I owe this college $40,000, right? And I'd like to do a payment plan. A lot of people will assume, well, there's no way I can go out of pocket $4,000 a month. You don't need to. You know, if you can only do $500, or I don't want to say only, but if you can do $500 a month, well, there's $5,000 that you're eating into that total of 40 grand, right? So the point is that for many families, you can't cash flow this whole thing. Most families, you cannot cash flow this whole thing. But even if we can cash flow a little bit, and it's helpful to do a payment plan, do it for whatever you can do, right? And then we talk about when to use what resources. Now, tonight, we're going to be in front of some people that have a lot of means. We're going to be in front of some people that have no means. Most folks will be somewhere in the middle there. But for families that have resources, we'll talk through when to use what. Generally speaking, any money in the student's name, UGMAs, UTMAs specifically, what are called custodial accounts. Those are going to be the first resources we want to exhaust for a multitude of reasons that I won't bore you with. Next one is college savings plans, right? 529 specifically being the big one. That is the most popular investment vehicle that many of our families that will be on the call tonight have some 529s if they're fortunate enough. Of course, that's not everybody. And then this other bucket that we kind of have informally earmarked for college, but that's kind of the talk track there. There's some granular things to think about when we talk about deploying 529s. Specifically, and again, I'm not going to bore you guys, but we will bore the parents with this tonight because it's important when and how this 529 gets dispensed to make sure that you're not doing, obviously not maliciously, but it's easy to make a mistake with the IRS depending on the timing of how you deploy these accounts and report it for tax purposes. So again, I'm not going to bore everybody with that, but it does matter, and it's a really easy mistake to make. So we walk them through that. We'll walk them through that tonight in some pretty significant detail. Okay. And again, the same thing, best practice for those families that are fortunate enough to have some grandparents or aunts or whatever chipping in for this. There's some things to talk through there that we will do. Again, this is some stuff that's in the weeds tax wise for those that have 529s, but again, really easy to mistake to make. As a matter of fact, I believe it's even designed this way because it's good for the IRS. It's not good for families. And there's a swing of if you kind of disperse this 529 incorrectly, you'll be costing your family $2,500 a year. So that's the headline that, again, I'm not going to bore you guys with at the moment, but we will walk them through best practice there to make sure that they get that $2,500 a year. We're talking about 10,000 over the course of 4 years. So on to the borrowing stuff, and I think it is worthwhile to spend a little bit of time with you guys on these things. And again, you let me know if that's not the case, or if you have other kind of break-in questions here. But like I mentioned earlier, there's no one size fits all, right? A family has to determine their criteria, and that's going to dictate their best recommendation. And that's something we'll do in this presentation, is help them figure out what their criteria is. Very few families know what their criteria is. If I ask them what's your borrowing criteria, I've never heard anybody say it's this. 100% of the time says, I have no idea what our borrowing criteria is. I've never been asked that before. I don't know what it means. So we'll spend some time with that. We also want to provide some guidelines in terms of how much is too much to borrow. Obviously, we're late in the game here, but I still think it's helpful to have something to anchor to. And this is kind of how what the math and the data supports is that really we don't want a student borrowing more than we expect them to make their first year out of college. Okay. So if I'm a computer science major, I can borrow up to $76,000 over the course of 4 years, of course, not annually, but over the course of 4 years. So almost $20,000 a year annually. And the math still makes sense. Now, obviously, I don't want to do that. We want to borrow way less than that, but the math still makes sense. Whereas if I'm planning to go into education, if I want to be an elementary school teacher, and I borrow $76,000 for the undergraduate degree, it doesn't, the math is not in our favor, right? Our threshold for how much we would want to borrow, quote unquote, comfortably is closer to $40,000, right? And again, we'll get a little bit more in the weeds tonight with kind of explaining this through monthly payments and where they can go to kind of gut check this stuff. And again, it's within our sophomores is going to be a great resource for them. But yeah, in terms of a short description of what we talked about tonight, it's in, if you even go to click on that registration link, it'll show you what we're going to talk about. But it's again, timing of paying the bill, best practices for when to use what resources, best practices and pros and cons of each loan option, right? So again, I'm giving you guys kind of a sneak preview right now, but if you click on that registration link, there will be a kind of a short description that parents can see. And if that's not sufficient, just let me know. We can get you something. I have something prettier that we use to kind of to market to our ecosystem. Okay, so just really quickly, high level types of loans, two types of federal loans, one for students, one for parents. There's the whole private student loan sector. There are state loan programs. There's some loans that the colleges themselves offer, albeit a very small number of them. And then we have this bucket for alternative loans. What if we use home equity, borrow against our 401k, take out a loan from a family member, et cetera. And again, we'll kind of hit on each of these. Now, this is kind of the one few places where we will give a universal recommendation, you could say. For any family that wants to borrow, we have them all start here, right? This federal direct student loan that every single family that is entitled to, every single student is entitled to, so long as they've completed and submitted the FAFSA. They can borrow up to a total of $27,000 a year. Relatively low interest rate, the relative, right, compared to some other options here. $27,000 over the course of 4 years. Actually, this is the older slide because it's actually up to 6% this year. This was for last year. But they don't need a cosigner. They don't need established credit. They're not going to get a bill until 6 months after they graduate from college or grad school. Incredibly flexible repayment terms, right? You're not going to find a better starting place than here. Okay. So for the first 27 grand we need to borrow, again, over these course of 4 years of college, firm recommendation. And again, that's really universal. I'd be hard pressed to find some outliers there. So here, there are just some good things, right? It establishes credit history. Obviously, if the loans are subsidized, they're not accruing interest while the kids are in school. There's no prepayment penalties. Even if you don't need to borrow, there's still an advantage to using this. Parents can pay it off for you. You graduate with established credit. And pretty simple, 2 simple steps they need to complete online for this loan to go through. Again, we'll walk them through that tonight. We also have a short kind of like line by line video that we'll share with them to say, hey, when you go to do this loan entrance counseling and sign a promissory note, Peg walks them through it kind of step by step as if she's the student executing these 2 steps here, right? The federal program for parents, the PLUS loan, okay. Again, we'll talk them through the pros and cons for the PLUS loan. It's only in the parent's name. It's the easiest loan to qualify for. So if you're a parent that doesn't have great credit, this could potentially be your only loan option. You're going to be approved or denied instantaneously. The rates stink. We're over 8%. There's a 4% origination fee. So it's an expensive loan. It has its benefits. There's a lot of forgiveness programs. Again, you're working with the federal government. So it's the most flexible, right? But it will be one of the most expensive options this year, rate wise, plus the origination fee is challenging, effectively making it a 10% loan. Excuse me. Okay, now state loan programs are almost like a hybrid of, in some ways, the Federal Plus loan and your kind of traditional private student loans, in that both the student and the parent or parents are equally kind of responsible for this loan. The language they use oftentimes is co-borrowers. Generally speaking, you're going to have the ability to get a lower rate than you are through the federal government, okay, than you are through a plus loan. You're not going to have the same flexibility. So you're going to lose some flexibility that you're not going to get the same way that you're going to get with the plus loan, right? You're not going to have any forgiveness programs. That's not on the table. Okay. So again, when we talk about pros and cons, this is where it can be relevant here. And there's 3 states you see here, 2 in the Northeast, 1 in the Midwest or in the Plains region there, right? Rhode Island, Mass, and Iowa. We flagged these 3 states because they're the only 3 states where, regardless of where you live or where your kid goes to college, you can take advantage of these options, right? So I can be a Washington State resident and go to school at the University of Chicago, and I can use Iowa's lending program, or Massachusetts or Rhode Island. Now, these are 3 of the more competitive state programs, and not all states have borrowing programs. So again, as you're weighing your options as a family, it's very, very, these guys don't market outside of their home states. So it's incredibly rare that I'll run into anybody that knows, number one, this is a thing, this is an option, and oftentimes it's a great option for families, one of these state programs, but they've never heard of them. They don't even know that it's possible. So, and I'm guessing that's kind of new news to some of you all, but that's for some families, this will be one of these will be their best options. Okay. Right. Private student loans. These are the kind of traditional, your traditional, what we think of as the Sallie Mae's and the SoFis and the College Aves and all this, where the student is the main borrower, the parent or whomever, somebody with established credit is going to be have to be attached to this loan as well as a cosigner. Okay. Anything above these federal direct student loans are going to require a cosigner. And the exact rate and repayment term that a student will get in this private student loan world is dictated by the cosigner's credit, their application, how healthy is their credit score, what's income, what's the net worth, right? If they're barely getting approved, you're going to have a really high interest rate. It's going to be in the teens this year. Okay. If you have a really robust application, you could get a rate from one of these lenders in the high 4s, lower than anywhere else you're going to find. Half of what you're going to get through the plus loan. Okay. There's no origination fees in the private student loan world, right? So the plus loan, there's a 4% origination fee, 4% coming off the top of your loan right away as a fee. That won't go to the college. It'll go right back to the federal government. Whereas for the private student loan sector, you don't have that fee. Now, look at what's the catch? Well, number one, if you don't have a great credit score, like I mentioned, you're going to pay a high rate. Number two, you're working with private companies. You're not going to get the same flexibility, certainly no forgiveness programs, right? These guys are very much a business, and that's just the reality, right? I do want to give you, I'm going to stop sharing for a second here because I want to share another link. Because a pretty cool and in my experience, somewhat okay. So Earnest, and I'm going to pop this in the chat as well. So of the private student lenders, and private students are not going to be for everybody, but this, oh wait, that was the, got to get it within here. I think you might have to disregard that, but well, that'll work for you. But for that link right there, Earnest is, I like what they do in the sense that if you are approved for a loan, so it's a pretty easy loan application too, but if a parent is approved for a loan, what they do is that they say, we will at least match any other loan that you're able to find elsewhere, right? So if it makes sense for a parent or a family to do a private student loan, usually what we'll recommend is start with Earnest, see what you get, see that you're approved, and then you can shop elsewhere. Do whatever other homework you want to do, bring it to them, and they will match it, right? So it's usually a pretty good place to get started. Now, again, the private student loan in general is not going to be the best fit for everybody, but for those that it is, that's going to be a good fit for them. That's just a smart thing to do, and again, relatively unique in my experience. Okay. Okay. So the mortgage and let's see, got a question here. Yeah, we should have I should have audio. It'd be a can everybody else hear me? I see somebody's not hearing me. If you can let me know, it'd be a bummer if nobody was hearing me. Somebody let me know if my audio is working or not, please. Yeah, all right. So folks can hear me. So sorry for whoever's having some issues there. Okay. Thanks everybody. Appreciate that. So then we get into this. So those are the three big buckets, right? On your kind of traditional student loans. That is the federal government, your state programs, and then you have the private sector. And in the private sector, you've got actually another thing that I like too. Like obviously I flagged Earnest specifically, but another thing that I like about our platform is that right within it, right, at the bottom here, we have all sorts of education around. The point is we're trying to help families with all parts of this process, right? But when it comes to borrowing, help them go through a similar logic tree that we're going through in the presentation, just hit them with a bunch of education. But for those folks that do want to do private student loans, they can compare apples to apples, right? And kind of obviously see, whatever side by side, but then they can go apply through here. But I think it's good to kind of just have that all in one place. I think is helpful. Okay, let me go back here. So I think I will be shocked if we recommend home equity as the best bet for any families this year, just with the current rates, right? This is something that we did all the time 3 years ago and beyond, right? 2-3 years ago, and in the past, where you could get incredibly competitive interest rates. So it just made sense. If you had equity, you were philosophically open to accessing it. Let's go. But for this year, it's one of these things of like, yep, it's an option. But when we look at the pros and cons, generally speaking, the cons are going to outweigh the pros here. We never want families to pull from their retirement account. So one thing I can tell you that, I would be vehement about recommending or not recommending. If a family says, should we use our retirement funds to pay for college? No. And again, I'm sure that's outside your job description. So you tell them to talk to somebody else, but you can say, from what I understand, that is not a good idea. And it's not just because they're robbing from retirement. They're going to get hit with an early withdrawal penalty if they're below 59.5. It's going to increase their taxable income. Not only are they going to pay more taxes plus the penalty, they'll get less financial aid in subsequent years, right? There's all these reasons why it's a bad idea. Now, sometimes families are an individual could have the ability to borrow against their 401k. That's a different story. Again, we don't recommend it as best practice. It's more of a last resort, but sometimes these interest rates are really, really good, 1-ish%, right? So you can't argue with that, but you got to start paying it back aggressively, within 5 years. And it comes with some other risk. And again, we're robbing from our retirement. So, again, look for plenty of families here. They're not fortunate enough to be in a position to have all these options. So we just have, we have to work with the hand that we're dealt, right? Let's put it that way. So we don't have the luxury of all these options, but if we can, we want to avoid this one in just about all cases. Again, some families have the ability to get loans from family members. We have some best practices there and some boxes that you want to check. Some families have the ability to borrow against life insurance policies that they have, cash value life insurance policies that they have. There's some clear benefits to this. Our big thing is don't withdraw, similar to a IRA, 401k, etc. Don't withdraw from it. For all sorts of reasons that are again, I won't go too far into detail talking about. But if you can borrow against it, there are some real benefits, and it should be a consideration again if you're one of those families that probably a smaller percentage have this option on the table. Okay, so this is the conversation that we're having just on a one-on-one basis with families that we work with, and also just talking in one of many in front of a room full of folks, and helping them understand what is my family's criteria, because again, that's going to dictate the recommendation. So how much does the rate of the loan matter? Usually everybody starts there. I just want the lowest loan rate. Okay, great. Well, you have a really you got a great credit score. You got a decent family income here. So maybe you go the private student loan rate, you go through Earnest, and you find out, hey, we can get this really competitive rate at 4.9%. That's amazing. Okay. And maybe that's our answer. However, maybe mom is a police officer. And so now we might want to consider the plus loan because there's a pretty robust forgiveness program there. Right. So my point being, or probably a better example is this family has a very, they don't have a dependable income. It spikes. Maybe they're self-employed. Maybe, one of the parents is in sales, and it is just feast or famine. In other words, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and the future is by no means guaranteed. Well, the private student loan market is going to say, you're going to pay us come hell or high water. Whereas the federal government, the plus loan, yeah, you're going to pay a higher rate, but they're going to work with you much more forgiving, more flexible, right? So these are the things I want to should be thinking about. Who do we want to be on the loan? So really the question is here, parents, is this your responsibility? Is it your kid's responsibility? Is it both? That's going to dictate our options, right? Some parents just say, hey, my kid's going to college. This is their deal. Well, there goes the plus loan. We're not doing that because only your name is on that loan. Okay. Some folks say, well, I think the plus loan is the best option for our family, but my kid's going to be responsible for paying back at least half of it. That's fine, but you got to be comfortable knowing that's a handshake agreement. Some families are not, and they say, no, I want my kid to be formally attached to that loan. Okay, well, plus loan's out. Now we're just dealing with the state option or the private options, right? I kind of touched on this already, but how much do I value this consumer flexibility, consumer protection, insurance is another way to put it, right? Some families say, get me the lowest loan rate. I don't care where that is. Easy, we're done with you. Others, again, well, you know what? I really do need to think about what if something goes wrong, right? And that bothers me. That keeps me up at night. So I'd rather pay a higher interest rate and just know I almost have some insurance in some ways when I work with the federal government, because they're going to be more flexible with me than some of these other lenders. So I'm willing to pay an additional. I'm willing to pay an additional amount, right? And again, I think the home equity is going to be less common this year, but it's something that we at least put on there. So a couple things here that I just want to share. Again, like I said, we're going to do a more in-depth version of this tonight, so feel free to share it with parents. Just circulate that if they can't attend live. This was the rate for the earnest loan program. Again, the private student loans are not going to be for everybody, but I like starting there for families that do have to go, or it makes sense for them to go that rate. And then, like I said, we have a grant program that is somewhat up for grabs, where if you're a school that doesn't work with us currently, but would want to deploy all the resources that we have, including the software and everything else in your school, let us know. Shoot me a note, whether it's in the chat here or counselor@collegeaidpro.com. And we will connect with you and get you your school, your office, and your families propped up on the platform. Okay. So I'll stick around for any more questions if we have any for a couple of minutes here. Otherwise, I'll let everybody get back to it. The other thing I'll flag here is our next coffee talk happens to follow on Juneteenth. So we will, that is a national holiday that we recognize at College Aid Pro as well. So none of us will be working that day, including coffee talk. So we've already, hopefully I already got a notification that we canceled that, but just FYI, if you want to mark it on your calendars. And otherwise, we'll say going once, going twice. All right, everybody. And for those of you that are off, congratulations and God bless for tuning in. For those of you that are off soon, hang in there. It's almost quitting time, right? And congratulations if I don't see you making it this summer. If I don't see you again, always appreciate your engagement and tuning in.